Hey everybody, welcome back to the Drawing Basics course. By the way, that's over at proko.com/drawing if you want to get the full course. Today I'm doing a line quality master study from my teacher, Jeff Watts.
Ooh, scary stuff. I'm gonna be doing attempting the impossible task of trying to study a Jeff Watts drawing. I don't know why I did this to myself, but here we are. No, the point of these is not to replicate. Again, it's to try to learn from the master that you're studying. Try to see a little bit into the decision making, into the technique that this artist is using, and see if you could replicate and get a little bit of what you like from that master drawing into your own process. When you study a master, you don't necessarily have to replicate everything about it. I'm not going to try to replicate exactly perfectly the shapes that Jeff uses, even though I really do like his shape design. I think it's great. I'm trying to just focus on getting his line quality. Also, when you jump into these, don't just jump right into the actual drawing. Start with your warm-ups, first of all. Like with line quality, a lot of it has to do with your actual hand being able to execute the line, right? And I'm just gonna do a page of just little warm-ups, and it'd be useful for you to actually try to do some warm-ups, practicing lines that look like the lines of the master you're about to study. Jeff has a lot of tapering, really dynamic strokes, lots of variety, where he'll have I think he does stuff like this, where it's little hatching lines this way. He has a lot of really big sweeping curves, lots of thin to thick, dynamic curves, little corners where he'll do stuff like this. So in order to imitate all of this line variety, I have to use a charcoal pencil on newsprint because it's really difficult to get the same exact line quality if you're not using this combination. But again, you could still study this stuff with different tools. Because even if I do use a charcoal pencil on newsprint and I'm using the overhand grip, I'm still not going to be able to replicate exactly what Jeff did. And even if Jeff tried to do a study of his own thing, his lines are going to look a little bit different. All right, so when I look at Jeff's drawing, I'm seeing that he has some really light lines that he used to just kind of map out placement of things. He's got a lot of horizontals going across. He's got a few verticals on the sides. Little lines where the bottom of the cheekbones are. You can see at the bottom of the jaw, there's some verticals. So he kind of mapped things in with some verticals and horizontals to get his big shapes. And they're light lines, but they're still very fluid, very nice looking lines. So I'm going to do the same, just kind of map in very lightly. And I mentioned that I don't care to get the exact shapes, but I do want to get somewhat close. I don't want to be too careless with it. He has a thing here, and it's a little bit high up. There's this big sweeping line. And then the reason he's doing that is he's kind of measuring these big distances on the face, the top of the brow, where the nose, the bottom of the nose is, and the bottom of the chin. If you compare these measurements, you want to get the relationships correct. So the middle is the smallest, then it's the bottom, and then the forehead. That's pretty close. I think, though, maybe the bottom right here needs to be a little lower. And actually, I could see right there, Jeff does also have a really soft line where he's marking off the bottom of the nose. You can see these horizontal lines where he just kind of marked off the bottom of that chin as well. He also has a center line. He does have this little rhythm that he's trying to connect of the bone in here. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to ignore the really dark lines right now, because those are probably the last lines he drew. He started with the light ones. And so I'm just trying to see what did he put in before he committed to those dark ones. So for example, I'm trying to put some of these construction lines that Jeff has in there to kind of just find the placement of the nose. He has this rhythm that he has going across here like that. And it's a very crisp line. So he's using the side of his pencil like this. And the more I look, the more I'm seeing just all these little light lines underneath. And I'm not going to get them all right because so much of it is kind of covered up. It's not completely clean. You could tell that this drawing was a construction. And actually, now that I'm seeing it, I feel like I see areas where Jeff initially had a line that he ended up fixing. It's right here, and then there's a dark line that he's got going through here. He kind of erased it a little bit right here and erased it a little bit here. I'm seeing eraser marks, and I feel like he initially had that line as the contour of the skull, and then he was like, oh no, that's not thick enough, and he added these lines. Well, if I don't capture that correction exactly, it's it's still fine. What if Jeff had put that line initially in the right spot where he wanted it and didn't have to make that correction? So again, you don't have to get those exact same lines that he has in his final, just the energy of it. You know, another thing that you're studying here is where there is a lack of lines. Like, you look at the way he designed the teeth, all the little shapes in the teeth. He lost all of the separations of the teeth on the side, right? Even in the middle, he has this separation of the horizontal between the top and bottom row, but he doesn't have a hard line between these two front teeth here and all the little teeth here. He's got a few very, very soft lines that almost disappear. And then most of the actual individual teeth are just indicated with the bottom connections and the top connections here. And then a few little separators on the sides on this side. He's treating it as one unit, but he's adding a lot of complexity on the edges of the big group of teeth. So remember, we were talking about line weight, where you can give something importance by making the outer part of it heavier, right? And so this is another kind of variation of that, where he's adding more detail on the outer shape of the teeth to make that whole unit of the teeth feel heavier and more important, whereas the inner parts in between really don't matter to him that much, because he doesn't want every tooth to be so important. And so, yeah, he's intentionally making that decision, and that's the kind of stuff that you're looking for. It's like, why did he do that? You know, why did he omit the lines there? And you try to figure it out. And all these little decisions are all over the place, and he's leaving clues about how he's making his drawings look interesting. And there's too many things to realize. There's too many things to learn from Jeff from this one drawing. I'm not going to be able to learn all of them, but as long as I pick up a few and I add them to my own toolbox, it's a win for me. I think I have enough at this point to just start going into my final strokes. And I'm going to start kind of on the left side and move to the right. I'm going to jump around a little bit, but I can't help it. But generally, I have a kind of a bad habit of smearing my drawing with my fingers, and they get all dirty in here. It does a lot of little flicking strokes that make things look like they're moving. Even his little lines, they're just like tiny little flicks. My proportions are probably going to be way off on this, and it's going to make the drawing look worse, because when he's doing this, like, a lot of his line work is second nature, and he's not focused on every little stroke of like the line quality. He's focused on the shapes, the design, trying to make everything kind of fit together nicely. And I'm focused on the lines, which is going to make my shapes all not as good. I could see it already, like the jaw is kind of small. Maybe these are a little bit too large, but that's not my priority. My priority is to make sure my lines look like Jeff lines and that I learn something from this. Not really sure what he's got going on here with these lines. Yeah, I really don't know what he's doing, honestly. I can ask him, but I don't know. They look cool. Put him in. Let's look at this shape of the eye. He's got some real nice dark thin lines here, here, and then in here it's a little bit softer because he's got several lines that are kind of making this whole thing feel softer, even though it's a group of a few sharp lines. And this actually is pretty much as dark as it gets right here. Little detail in here for the corner. And then in this area it gets much lighter. He mapped out his shadow, cast shadow on the inside. Very soft, thick lines. Coming in here, mapping in some of the edges of the bone here. A lot of this is based off of the shapes he was seeing of like the shadows and the halftones. You know, he's trying to indicate those three-dimensional volumes. Eventually, as we get to that in this course, we'll start to figure out how we can also use lines and edges and values to indicate three-dimensional form. But right now, don't worry too much about why he's using each type of line and where it is. It's like, what is this? What is this indicating, right? Jeff knows exactly what that is in the moment. If he were to shade that, it means something to him. It's like a blueprint for his shading. And to us, it's not completely clear what that is, but it looks cool. And it's in the right spot. And again, we will learn how to do that and how to make those decisions later on in the course. But then look at this, right in here, he's got these really soft lines. I might even need to switch to like a softer, thicker pencil. See, these are totally different charcoal pencils. I don't know which charcoal pencil he was using. He's got these Ritmos, he's got these Wolf Carbons, he's got these Contes, and they're all slightly different. Like this one's thicker than this one, and that's thicker than this one, and they have different textures, and they go down a little bit different. So I'm not sure what he was using, but I know that from my experience, I know I can get these like real nice soft edges better or easier with a Ritmo or a Conte. And that was totally not what's there, but it felt like a Jeff thing to do, so I don't know, that's why I did it. It's also a lot easier to go darker with these, so the pencil kind of dictated that to me. I'm going to switch back over to this Wolf Carbon, which is a little more subtle, it's a little more scratchy. It's got such a crisp line right there that just like, I don't know, I mean, I can try to get that. But that's one thing I learned from doing these Jeff studies is that like the range of his lines is broader than most artists that I know. He'll have the most crisp, thin line possible and the softest line, like super, super soft lines up here. And then he'll have extremely light lines in areas and then really dark lines in areas. And just like the range of everything that he could have is really extreme. And that range makes things really interesting. But he's able to keep things still unified, like really thin, really thick next to each other, but they feel like they're working together. That's not very easy to do. So even this little shape, it could have been so much more boring. You could have just put like a little square there. But the range, again, it's that range. Like he's got this really nice light line here, something like this here, really crisp at the bottom, and then it kind of flicks and tapers off to a really light line down this way. Of course, it didn't capture exactly, but I got that idea in my head, and if I do that enough times, I'll eventually start thinking in that way and designing shapes similarly. It takes a lot of practice to really get to the point where you're naturally designing shapes like this. But yeah, the only way to get there is to just keep trying to design your shapes. And not just shapes, designing your lines, your colors, your values, your shapes, everything in the way that the artists that you enjoy looking at design their stuff. And you just keep trying to replicate, you keep studying, and eventually it just becomes more and more a natural thing that you do, rather than the thing that you're just like trying so hard to replicate and failing at. Even this little triangle over here, like look at this line is really soft, or not really soft, but it's softer compared to this one and this one. And it does give a better sense of three-dimensional form in this area because he's indicating forms with different types of lines. That's a pretty advanced thing. Again, you do need to learn a little bit more about form later in the course to be able to truly understand what that means. But for now, just copy lines. The reason I started the course with line is because really a big hurdle to get past when you're starting out drawing or really any skill is just getting comfortable with your tool and gaining control of the tool. Even if like all of a sudden I just gave you all of this understanding of what are 3D forms, how does light affect the forms, you know, all of a sudden everything about anatomy, and just like uploaded all this knowledge into your brain. But then you still can't execute it with your hand because you just don't know how to use the tool. It doesn't matter. Your drawings still won't look good. And it takes a really long time to get that muscle memory for your hand to do what you want it to do. You really need to start training yourself to do that early on, getting that dexterity. Otherwise, you're always going to be frustrated. The more you know, the more you're going to hate your drawings when they don't look the way you want them to. And so try to get that control before you know so much that you just like absolutely hate everything you do. Every line is just so different. It's like, look at this shape in here. It's slightly thicker, so you use a little more of the side. It's pretty dark, but then it becomes thinner towards this area. And then the line right next to it, right up here, is just super thin. Well, up like that. And all of them are just flicking, confident lines. I just noticed like my cheekbones are completely in the wrong spot. like this one's way too small. It's a big enough problem that I'm gonna try to fix it. And I think I will actually just drop that down a little bit as I put the final lines down. Because why not? I mean, I've already noticed that the jaw's not long enough, so might as well fix it as I go. really nice tapering line from like super crisp and dark to really light and kind of airy as it goes off to the side. So just a very interesting taper of this whole area. That's really filled with a lot of energy because there's multiple strokes on the outsides and then really one nice crisp one in the middle. I still feel like my jaw doesn't have that nice length, but whatever. Again, I'm not gonna labor over the shape design. Although Jeff would also be a good one to study shape design with. He actually has more vertical line separations above the teeth, like in this area, than within the teeth. Interesting. Yeah, look at how subtle some of the line work is. So notice how he's using a slightly thicker line on the left side, indicating that this maybe there was shadow there. He kind of has the similar thing in these two little triangular shapes where on the right, his lines are real crisp. I actually didn't make it crisp enough. Where it's like, this one's crisp, this one's crisp. And then on this side, they're much thicker and darker, potentially indicating that maybe this was a dark shadow and this was maybe like a lighter halftone. The same shape on the opposite side, but with a different shadow effect on it. So it definitely tells me that he's basing some of his line weight on the shadow, like how much contrast and shadow are we seeing on that form. Nice swooping line in here where he's just kind of doing this. That's the kind of line you can't really get unless you're holding the pencil this way. You can construct that line. Like if I wanted to use the tip of my pencil, I could do that and I could kind of construct a similar line. But I can't get it with one flick of the pencil like Jeff did in that drawing. So if I'm trying to learn his technique, then I would try to replicate the actual technique instead of trying to just like deconstruct every line. Because this drawing would take like 3 times longer if I had to construct every soft line like that with the tip. You would just be learning the wrong technique with the wrong tool. Still potentially beneficial, right, to study line weight with a tool that doesn't necessarily give you that same variety, but just not as efficient. I am noticing that one thing that is in my lines is not as subtle as his is the value control. He's got lighter lines like in some of these construction line areas than I did. I went a little bit too dark initially, and so they're kind of showing through. And then also some of my initial lines were now too soft, and probably because like look at my hand probably went across and blurred a lot of that out. Whereas in Jeff's, a lot of those initial lines stayed really crisp. So that's one thing I'm seeing now that I'm just like, dang it. Me running my hand across really does kind of ruin that crispness of everything. Which I have 2 options for that. I can either try to see if I can figure out a way where I can make my style work with that, or that could become a strength, a benefit, where I have some really soft, light lines that contrast with a lot of other lines in the front. Right, so it's like you can turn a weakness into a strength, but it's good to be aware of these, certain things that you're doing. The other option is to put a sheet of paper under your hand and rest on that. Okay, at this point, what I'm doing is I'm trying to back up a little bit. God, I almost stabbed myself in the face with this. I'm trying to back up a little bit and see what I missed, see if there's anything that I need to improve or add or remove. Obviously, I didn't fill in the eye sockets. I guarantee you I will miss some shapes that you guys might be seeing right now that I don't have yet. But yeah, one thing that I've been studying for the past 20 years with Jeff's lines that I still cannot do is his ability to get such super crisp lines like that in there just very naturally. He just gets those in there. My natural lines tend to come out a little bit more in between, just like a little bit more in the middle. Like in here, like look at the edge he created along here. Mine is just a little bit thicker throughout where he's got these crisp lines. Maybe I can come in and be like, okay, I didn't do that as well as I wanted to. And since I'm not just trying to get a good drawing, I'm trying to actually learn, I could redo that area. I could be like, hey, what did he do? He got crisp line like that, crisp line here. And try to redo it a few times. See if you can get the same line quality that he did. Okay. So I gotta say, that was really fun. I haven't done a master study in a while. Yeah, it does remind me of how important this is to do. That like now if I were to do some life drawing session, I feel like my lines would be better if I were to go right now and do a drawing, because I've just kind of like set the bar in my head a little bit higher. I've opened up the range of lines in my head and in my hand, and I feel like I would do better. So, doing these once is valuable, but doing a lot of these to the point where you're actually starting to really reinforce a lot of these concepts into your brain and getting your hand used to doing specific motions that you're studying, it really, really has a lot of impact on how much you retain. Yeah, it's great if you do one study, something's click and you understand something, but if you don't reinforce that 10, 20 times, 6 months from now, you might completely forget it. And it's not going to become part of your intuition, which is really what you want to do, is have all of these things become part of just something you don't have to think about anymore. Your hand and your brain just naturally start to do some of this stuff. The best thing I could do right now is to try to use the same types of lines that Jeff's using, but do it on my own in a completely different subject. And that will tune my brain into that type of thinking even more, because now I'm actually trying to tap into that on my own within an actual process of a drawing from start to finish while I'm solving those problems on my own, instead of just copying someone else's drawing. If you just go right back to the same type of line you naturally go back to, you're not going to really get that thing that you learned from the master to become part of your own thing. You have to make that part of your process as well. Anyway, it's fun. Hope you guys are enjoying this, and I hope you guys are learning more practical things about line.
Thank you all for watching. If you want to watch the extended version of this lesson and get all the extra premium lessons in the Drawing Basics course, head over to proko.com/drawing. I have 30 lessons for the line section alone, and we still have shape, perspective, and shading lessons coming up. I think this course is the best way to learn drawing from scratch, or review all those critical fundamentals for intermediate artists. In fact, most projects in this course have 2 levels, one for the beginners and another for the intermediate students. I often see students with large gaps in their fundamentals, and this course will help new and experienced artists get that solid footing. I'll see you there.